WMUL fans and fans from across the Sun Belt. Welcome to another edition of Word on the Belt. My name is Grant Johnson. I'm one of the sports editors of The Breeze, James Madison's student newspaper. And today I'm joined with Tyler Kennett, former sports editor of the Parthenon from Marshall student newspaper. Tyler, how are you doing this afternoon?
Doing well. Everything's good. Just graduated, so someone else will take my spot soon, but still a big fan of Marshall. Excited for this.
Love it. Glad to have you here this afternoon for sure. So, listeners, if you're new to Word on the Belt, what this kind of is this a video series presented by The Breeze, again, James Madison University student newspaper, where we're trying to go around the conference, go around the Sun Belt, talk to student media, talk to media, people who are covering these new Sun Belt opponents for JMU, and really try to get to know about the history a little bit and help, kind of ease that knowledge into JMU's transition with the Sun Belt. So today with Marshall, Tyler, what I really want to get into first is, kind of give the listeners a brief history of Marshall's history and, talk about some of the top players that have been through Marshall, across sports. I know Randy Moss is one of them, but, just talk a little bit about the history and kind of, help a fan who maybe doesn't know too much about Marshall get to know them a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I was looking earlier at the Hall of Fame for Marshall athletics. I was like, wow, there are a lot of people here that I've never heard of. And it's probably just because, a lot of the history for Marshall seems to be a lot more dated. I'm also 22, so if you're older, you're probably like, wow, this guy. But so I kind of went the route of players that I watched growing up as a kid. Funnily enough, was, I'm more close to Virginia, so I was not really a big fan of Marshall until I got to the school. But the players that I wrote down, obviously, to start off with Randy Moss, if you ask anyone from Marshall, he's the best wide receiver ever. Probably the best pure athlete to ever come through West Virginia, period. Was an amazing receiver in the NFL. I mean, if he's in the Hall of Fame, so that's kind of one of those things where if you're going to play football at Marshall, you're going to hear about Randy Moss along the way. Somebody's going to tell you about him. So another pretty major player for football was Chad Pennington, who was a quarterback alongside Randy Moss. Was drafted in 2000 in the first round, I believe, by the Jets. Correct me, I'm not too big in the NFL. But Pennington was respectable in the NFL. I mean, he had like a 60% completion percentage for his entire career, but there's this little guy named Tom Brady that kind of puts a stain on the fact that he was drafted in the first round. So that's that. Ahmad Bradshaw played for the Giants, Super Bowl champion running back. He was from a local high school from where I'm from, so I have to shout him out as well. Troy Brown played for the Patriots, won 3 Super Bowls with the Patriots. Going into basketball, one more. Byron Leftwich, can't forget about him. He finished top 6 in the Heisman voting back when he had a broken leg. So he didn't even play half the season and still finished top 10 in Heisman voting. He was amazing. He's also coaching right now for Tampa Bay offensive coordinator with Tom Brady. He had a lot of injuries during his career, played with Jacksonville, my favorite team in the NFL. So he was pretty solid, backed up Ben Roethlisberger, won a Super Bowl in that, if you want to call it that. But he was the top 7 pick, so he was another top-level guy drafted in the NFL. In basketball, you have Dan D'Antoni and Mike D'Antoni. So if you're an NBA fan and you know the coaching systems, Mike D'Antoni, I think he was most recently with the Nets, but he also coached the Rockets when James Harden was going crazy. Invented a pretty unique style of coaching. His brother Dan also played for Marshall. Both of these guys played for Marshall, by the way. But Dan was a coach with Mike in the NBA for a little bit as an assistant, but now he coaches Marshall's men's basketball team. So there's that for you. Hal Greer, can't forget about Hal Greer. All-time NBA 75 team member. He averaged over 20 points for his entire career in the NBA. And he was also the first African-American athlete to get a scholarship for a white college in West Virginia. So he's, historically, I think he's the most important player from Marshall's history personally. He's just also one of my favorite players because he played for my favorite team, the Sixers, with Wilt Chamberlain, won a title with him. He recently got a statue as well outside, so if you guys ever come up to West Virginia to see the Cam Henderson Center, you'll see that. And then just a shout out to Rachel Folden for softball. She bat like 400 average for her entire career and kind of wrote the history books for softball until very recently, so I want to shout her out as well as one of the most dominant athletes in general. And also in the Huntington area, we have Huntington Prep, which is a uh, kind of like a college prep for basketball. A few players that have came out of there. Miles Bridges for the Hornets, Jonathan Kuminga, who just won an NBA championship, Keldon Johnson for the Spurs, and Andrew Wiggins, who ended up being a number one pick, came out of Huntington. So that's pretty much my little roundup for you there.
Yeah, definitely a lot more talent from, West Virginia than, someone might think. But, another angle kind of bringing this to the forefront with, where Marshall's at right now. I really want to hit on everything that happened with the Conference USA and the Sun Belt kind of struggle there. I mean, if listeners, if you don't know, Marshall is in kind of an entanglement with, trying to leave the Conference USA, but the Conference USA didn't want them to leave. At one point, the Conference USA included them on their football schedule, and the Sun Belt did too. Marshall took the Conference USA to court. Just a bunch of crazy things happened kind of in, February and March of this past year. So, Tyler, as someone who is, covering that as sports editor at the Parthenon, like, take me through what it was kind of day by day, kind of documenting that, that struggle and what was going on with that, kind of internal battle at Marshall.
Yeah, sure. It was kind of weird. It was like all of Marshall fans and like the people around the area in Huntington, I think we all knew that the Sun Belt was where Marshall was planning to go. There was the change up we mentioned before we started recording. Marshall had just got a new university president with Brad Smith, was getting a new athletic director, was looking to make a lot of big strides. Also trying to build a baseball stadium for the nth year. It's been forever since they've said they're going to build a baseball stadium, but that's besides the point. So all these big changes are coming, and one other thing was, all in the meanwhile, while this is happening, the American kind of collapses. Big 12 changes up some teams. A lot of teams are moving up. So Marshall is like, a lot of people at Marshall were like, where's Marshall going to go? Is Marshall going to go up? Because Marshall pretty much had been fairly dominant, hadn't won a lot of championships in Conference USA, but was always a top level talent in most every sport. So it became a question of, is Marshall going to move on to the American? Is Marshall going to move on to something even bigger than that? Probably not. So the Sun Belt comes along and everybody's like, oh, well, this is great. But we expected that the Sun Belt wasn't going to be a thing until not this season, but next season, I believe 2023. But then Marshall pushed for it and tried to get I think it was a restraining order against Conference USA. The way that this kind of fell out was, I'm in the newsroom and I'm like, Conference USA released a schedule and it's got Marshall on it. And then like the next day, the Sun Belt did too. And it was like, so I made this graphic that had the one schedule on this side and the other on the other. So it was like, you could imagine how confusing it would be for like our readers, and everything else was like, what's going to happen within the week. Marshall's taking Conference USA kind of the court, like as just being like, we don't want to have to pay the exit fee. And the reasoning was because I don't remember exactly what it was. I'm pretty sure that there were other teams that had left Conference USA that had never had any sort of, they weren't forced to pay these fines or whatever it was that was held up against Marshall's face. So Marshall ended up getting out of it and was able to go to the Sun Belt. And after that, it's been kind of smooth sailing. But there for a little bit, it was like a lot of people thought it was going to be Conference USA for another year. And then now it's like Conference USA barely has a conference. So it's kind of all exploded underneath them within a matter of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine covering that on a daily basis. I mean, Jamie had its own kind of internal battles, the CAA, trying to leave CAA, not letting them, play in postseason play. But, now that, Jamie is in the Sun Belt, Marshall's in the Sun Belt, kind of talk to me a little bit about, what you kind of foresee for 2022. How's football looking? How's basketball looking? Men's soccer, their perennial power. Kind of talk to me a little bit about, kind of the outlook on some of these teams and, some maybe players to watch across all sports in 2022.
Yeah, for football, I'm looking around, and there's Justin. But for football, the thing that I was looking at the most was the quarterback situation that was going on with Marshall. This year, Henry Colombi comes in as quarterback for Marshall. He was a quarterback for Texas Tech. So if you're a fan of some of the bigger Power Five schools, you may have heard of him. He played a little bit. He was pretty solid. I definitely think that he's an upgrade from what Grant Wells was, who is now quarterback at Virginia Tech, which is quite funny, considering it's in Virginia and all that nonsense. But Rasheen Ali, running back for Marshall, is probably a household name if he doesn't play in Conference USA last year. I mean, he was insanely good, 100 yards a game type of guy. The offense is going to run through Rasheen Ali this season. It'll be interesting to see what Marshall does offensively. I think that, with Corey Gamage being the leading receiver coming back this season, you have a pretty solid outlook offensively, but you do lose Willie Johnson, who was our speed guy, and Xavier Gaines, who, if you've never seen Marshall play football, Xavier Gaines, during his first couple of years, routinely played tight end, wide receiver in the slot, and quarterback in wildcat formations all at once. So he was kind of like the do-it-all guy for Marshall on the offensive side of things. So I think that, those guys being gone, it's going to be felt. Willie Johnson got drafted by the Chiefs in like the 7th round or something like that. So he was a pretty good talent. So for this year, a lot of that depth talent that Marshall had at the receiver position last year has got to step up. So I don't think that Marshall can like compete with Louisiana and Coastal immediately. But I mentioned Chad Pennington, his son is at Marshall, so he should probably be coming around next year. I think that that's the guy that a lot of people want to see play. But Cam Fancher, I'm blanking on names, but Peter Zamora, a few of those guys are definitely like high-level quarterbacks that are really talented, that are definitely going to be somebody that could replace Columbia in a season and be really impressive to watch. A lot of fun.
So, as Tyler mentioned, kind of, while he was talking, we're also joined by Justin Zimmer, one of the radio voices for, Marshall Student Media. Glad he could join us a little bit late, but Justin, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing really good. Doing really good. So, Justin, I want to bring you into this conversation. We're kind of talking about, the outlook for Marshall in 2022. Maybe, outside of football, like how are some of the teams looking maybe on the hardwood with basketball or, men's soccer has been a perennial power. How are some of these teams looking for 2022? And maybe who are some players that you're keeping an eye on, across all sports?
Well, I'll start with men's basketball. I'll start there. Rough season a year ago in the last year in Conference USA, they had like a 10-game losing skid. They broke it against UAB back in the end of January. So I'm interested to see how they do with new competition. The Sun Belt's kind of not really been respected in basketball, kind of been a 16 seed the past couple brackets. So very interested to see how Marshall can adjust to the Sun Belt. And then you talk about men's soccer. That is a perennial powerhouse. The Sun Belt is a top-notch conference in soccer with everybody coming in from Conference USA to join all the affiliate members. So it's a top-notch conference. So I think soccer-wise, I think you'll hear a lot of Milo Yosef, Oliver Semla, who I think won the Golden Glove, or at least was up for it a couple of years ago when Marshall made that run for the national title. And then basketball, it's about Tavion Kinsey. He's, NBA prospect, round the first, second round in multiple drafts. So Marshall's got a lot of good athletic talent. It's just the Sun Belt is going to be a step up in competition in every sport.
For sure. Sounds like it. And then Justin, something I want to swing back on that I got Tyler's thoughts on this a little bit ago that I also want to talk to you about. I was, kind of asking him about what it was like to cover, everything that was going on with the Conference USA and Sunbelt struggle and fiasco. I guess from your point of view as a radio guy, talk a little bit about, kind of covering that, week to week, day to day, like the developments. What kind of maybe surprised you about it? Like, what was kind of your reaction on a weekly basis to all the developments that are happening?
Well, I think my reaction was I hadn't seen that in college athletics. I've watched college athletics for a long time. I don't think I've ever seen one conference sue a bunch of schools for leaving early. And we did an Inside Conference USA program, so obviously those weeks it was the forefront of conversation. It obviously had to be. I think part of it was you want to, at least in my case, you want to kind of play both sides of it. You want to say, okay, this is the Marshall Southern Miss Old Dominion argument. This is why, hey, it's great to get out early. And Conference USA, they had their perspective on it. And we try to talk about both. Now, it's a business. You have to kind of realize that, money's involved and businesses are involved. But, it was interesting. You're not expecting to cover a conference realignment lawsuit. I say that candidly because, it was kind of surprised when you saw just like the statements and you're like, okay, it kept getting up and up and up. And then I think we all thought it was going to court. We all thought it was going there. I was surprised when it got settled. And I think that was kind of it ended right before we got off the air with Inside Conference USA, but it was kind of an interesting story arc, like a storyline through that second half of the season that we normally just focus on basketball, and we didn't really expect conference realignment to come in, but it was interesting. And Tyler and I wrote a piece for the newspaper about that Hurt, and Hurt leaves and Conference USA insists they stay.
Yeah.
It was a chaotic situation, but you try to cover it with diligence and get respect to both sides, and I thought we did that.
And then, Tyler, I want to kind of ask you, were you kind of along the lines of Justin? Did you think it would end up in court?
I don't know. Like I think that if it because I'm pretty sure that the court that was going to be used was in Huntington, like in Cabell County. So it was like, what are they going to rule for, right? Type of thing. But so it was like the first lawsuit comes out, and then Marshall's like, well, okay, we'll do one too, type of thing. And uh, it just seemed like there wasn't enough in the paper, like in the history books, in terms of Conference USA for them to have a case. So eventually it just became a settlement type of thing. But there for a minute, it was like, it'd be cool to see it go to court because it would be kind of fun to cover, I feel like. But no, it ended up kind of falling flat on us a little bit. I don't think I ever really expected it to go, deep. We got to go cover it on ESPN type of thing. It was kind of just like a formality of trying to get out and trying to avoid paying the money. I honestly thought Marshall was just going to end up paying because Marshall has a pretty good booster system. I felt like Marshall could have just paid the fine or whatever it was, like the thing that they were trying to put on Marshall. I thought that I was just going to be, rather than actually fight court, it would just go into just trying to get it done so we can play, because I imagine a big court case would have taken up a lot of time of the seasons and whatnot. So, I'm kind of glad it ended up the way it did, but it would have been kind of fun to see it really go deep, like sitting in a courtroom type of thing. But that's just the journalist in me wanting to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that too. I mean, that's the more drama, the better, right? So, one thing I kind of want to kind of skip ahead to get your perspective on JMU this year. Obviously, it's as Marshall is going to the Sun Belt, so is JMU. Obviously, a bigger jump for JMU going from an FCS conference in the CAA to going all the way to FBS and all the expenses that come with that, and getting more scholarship players. Obviously Marshall going from Conference USA to the Sun Belt, you're already kind of, in the FBS, what it takes, you've been there, but kind of talk about, what you kind of foresee with, JMU this year, football, other sports maybe, but, them kind of making that jump. What's kind of your outlook on JMU for 2022 and beyond the Sun Belt? Tyler, you can start.
Yeah, sure. I first remember whenever JMU was coming through. I forget exactly who it was contacting me. We were kind of back and forth through emails about it and whatnot. And I got into like the research of it, just trying to see just for myself what it takes to jump from FCS to all that stuff. And it's insane, the amount of it's pretty rigorous what you had to do to get through to it. So I think that personally, even if there's no immediate success for JMU, that you have to take that as a win that you're just here, for one. But I remember watching, as someone who now covers the Mountaineers at WVU, JMU took Mountaineers for blows a couple years ago in football. I mean, this is a team that, from the perspective of someone who was in that D1, we're playing against pretty solid teams. JMU was always the college football conversationist of this is a team in the FCS that can beat you. Don't schedule JMU. JMU can actually beat you. It's not like a pump up game. It's actually a little bit of a challenge. So I think that to earn that sort of reputation behind you, you have to be good. I think the Sun Belt is very competitive, but for the reason being that it's also very top heavy. That that middle bit of Sun Belt football is extremely competitive. Conference USA was the same thing, for us at least. You had UAB and whatnot up top, but everybody else on the bottom was going crazy every week. So I think that JMU has a chance to compete with just as much as Marshall, at the top of football. But I'm not really a big football guy. I like to talk about soccer a little bit too. Mm-hmm. And I personally, for me, I don't like predicting stuff, but it's if I could say two teams could go Sun Belt Championship right now, I could see it be Marshall and James Madison, just because, JMU and Marshall probably have the most NCAA experience in terms of the tournament. JMU was like annually going a couple years ago. So if you're not watching soccer at JMU, you should be. Not just because Marshall was the number one team in the country last year and won the championship a year before, but because it's probably one of the most stacked conferences in sports, period. I'm pretty sure there's over 30 tournament appearances between all of the schools that are in this conference. And you're not just talking about Sunbelt. You've got Kentucky, South Carolina, a lot of those teams that play in bigger conferences in the Power Five and other sports don't sponsor soccer, so they come and join into the Sunbelt. So you have a lot of excitement to watch there. But yeah, I'm excited. I think that basketball too. JMU is a really exciting team in men's basketball. I don't watch a lot of college basketball other than the women's side of things. So I haven't gotten to watch JMU play all that much, but we were talking about Virginia. I do remember watching that game, and that was a big win. So if you can beat Virginia, you can beat anybody, in my mind at least.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that. And Justin, I'll swing it over to you. What are you kind of seeing with JMU? Kind of in their transition to the Sun Belt?
Well, I have a lot of great respect for the program. I saw a little bit of their football a year ago once they made this. I kind of watched a couple of games, just kind of look at the personnel. Even though the roster changes, I wanted to get a good look at them. I thought they played well the couple of games I watched. I'm interested. To me, like, they are the one team I'm really interested in seeing how they're going to do. You look at the FCS, you look at the FBS, and with James Madison, it's kind of like we've seen this a couple of times with Coastal and App being prominent examples in the Sun Belt, but not in the 1 year. Not FCS the next 1 year, and then FBS the next year. I'm really interested to see how they play. I kind of have them near mid to bottom of the pack. I think I froze up there, but mid bottom of the pack in the Sun Belt Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other sports, I think they'll be good. I think they beat Virginia a year ago. That was an impressive win. Soccer, they obviously routed Marshall 7-1. So
yeah,
they've gone up against the champs, but I think it's a good conference. I think it's a good move for James Madison. It'll give the Sun Belt a presence here in DC. Just JMU just being 3 hours from DC, but I think James Madison will be a very interesting fit to the Sun Belt. I think they'll expand the portfolio, and I'm excited to see him. I mean, first time I'll get to see him is October 26th in football. I don't know if they're on a volleyball or soccer schedule. I didn't see him there, but I'm looking forward to calling many JMU games this year.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Marshall is coming to Harrisonburg this year. Definitely be a sight to see. So, Tyler, Justin, that's pretty much all I have for you this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming on to Word on the Belt and representing Marshall and kind of giving your input on, you guys being new to the Sun Belt, as well as, some outlook on JMU. We appreciate that a lot. So I think before we get out of here, Tyler and Justin, I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to kind of, plug your social media and talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. I just graduated from Marshall, so I'm still working with the Parthenon for the summer. You can check us out, Marshall Parthenon, whatever. Just look it up; you'll find it. Just don't look for the building in Greece, and you'll find your way. I am also a writer, so I do some poetry and whatnot. You can find me on Twitter at Tyler Kennett, just my name. I am doing local news now for WVU, so I'll be out of the Marshall scene. So if you probably don't want to follow me for the Marshall news, I would check up Grant Trailer for that. He's got all the Marshall hits. So if you're trying to just follow one person for every team in all of the Sun Belt, that's who I would go for. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. Well, definitely, of course, we'll check out a fellow Grant for sure. So, Justin, can you talk a little bit about, what you're doing?
Sure. Now the new sports director at WMUL, the student radio station at Marshall. Twitter, I believe it's at Justin _ Zimmer. Or you'll find it under the WMU Twitter. So I'll play by play in the fall. So other than that, looking forward to hoping coming on this show again and multiple times, and hoping to build a good relationship with James Madison and the rest of the Sun Belt. I'm really looking forward to it. It's an exciting opportunity for Marshall and for all of us who will get to cover.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely excited. Justin, will I be seeing you at Sun Belt Media Day?
I hope so. We'll see. I still have to figure out the credential situation, but if I can get down there, I hope to. I'm working in Carolina now for an internship, so we'll see if I can accommodate both. But If not, I'll see it definitely around throughout the Sun Belt.
For sure, for sure. All right, so Tyler, Justin, I'm about ready to wrap this up. Listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition of Word on the Belt. We'll have more Sunbelt content coming for you July 1st and all of July as Jamie transitions to the Sunbelt. So that said, thank you so much, Tyler and Justin, and have a great rest of your days, okay?
Yeah. See ya. Thank you for having me.